morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the 80th Emerging Growth Conference and day 2 of our 2-day Super Virtual Investor Conference. I'm Anna Berry. So today we're running until about 4 Eastern, and when we switch to the next company, you'll see a black screen for a moment. Don't go anywhere. That's just us moving over to the next presenter. If you experience downtime, refresh your browser. Everything usually works properly once you do that. And our platform does work best on Google Chrome. So if you're watching from an Apple device, you have to hit the play button to start the session. Now, during each company's presentation, you can submit questions through the webcast module, and we will attempt to address as many of these at the end of the presentation. And all of our conferences, they're uploaded to our Emerging Growth Conference YouTube, so please subscribe, youtube.com/Emerging Growth Conference. One last note, after today's event, you'll be redirected to the registration page for our next conference in April, so please stay on or come back to reserve your spot early. We are happy to begin with ASP Isotopes Inc. It trades on the NASDAQ under the symbol ASPI and is a pre-commercial stage advanced materials company dedicated to the development of technology and processes to produce isotopes for use in multiple industries. Happy to welcome Paul Mann, CEO. Welcome, Paul. Good evening to you. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you. Yes, it's great to join you. I'm in South Africa today, so it's early evening for me.
All right, wonderful. The floor is yours, Paul. Call me when you're ready for questions.
Great. So we'll do the usual format where I'll run through our investor presentation, and then we'll open up the Q&A. The investor presentation will take about 15 minutes, and then we'll have Q&A for 15 minutes. So we're a NASDAQ listed company, so if you could just read these forward-looking statements, that'd be great. And please refer to our SEC filings for all disclaimers and for risk factors and our 10Ks, etc. So we're a company that makes isotopes, and isotopes, we'll talk about them in a moment, but they're used in many different industries. You probably touch them every day and don't even know that. It's a very special form of chemical, and our main end markets are going to be medical, semiconductors, and nuclear energy. And all three are growing and have got very interesting kind of applications right now. Our company has 3 divisions. You'll see those on the right-hand side of this slide. So ASP Isotopes in the middle is the part that produces stable isotopes, and we'll talk more about those in a moment. And we have 3 manufacturing plants here in South Africa, where I am today, and 2 of them are in commercial production. The 3rd is being commissioned right now. Should start commercial production, very, very shortly. To the left, you see PET Labs. So PET Labs is a radioisotope company. It's the leading supplier of radioisotopes in sub-Saharan Africa, and our plan is to triple the size of that business over the next few years, as well as grow it internationally outside of South Africa and other regions. And PET Labs consumes a lot of stable isotopes. So the relationship between PET Labs and ASP Isotopes is a very symbiotic relationship. One lives off the other and the other feeds the other. And to the right, you see Quantum Leap Energy. And that is focused on producing the nuclear fuels of the future, specifically high-assay, low-enriched uranium, and lithium-6, lithium-7 for nuclear fusion. And our plan is to spin that out as a separate entity as soon as possible, ideally later this year. And that business has signed a number of MOUs and term sheets with companies like TerraPower and Nexo. And our plan is to build the first next-generation nuclear fuel plant in South Africa over the next few years. This slide just shows our main milestones for the year. And the main milestone really is to get that middle part of the company, ASP Isotopes, to promote cash flow break even and generating free cash flow. And to do that, we need to start these 3 plants up, and I'm in the process of doing that at the moment. So what is an isotope? Well, different chemicals are identified by the different position on the periodic table. There are different numbers of protons and electrons, different number of protons inside the nucleus. And so they're chemically very different. Hydrogen is different to carbon, is different to oxygen. They look physically different. You can separate them by chemical means. Carbon's a solid at room temperature. Hydrogen and oxygen are both gases at room temperature. And what an isotope is that it's basically various members of the same element with different numbers of neutrons in the nucleus. So, for example, carbon has 3 isotopes: carbon-12, carbon-13, and carbon-14. And if I took a bag of carbon, so a bag of charcoal, a kilo of charcoal, it probably sells at about $1 a kilo, something like that. If I take a kilo of carbon-14, we're producing it and selling it for $24 million a kilo, and has very special applications which it's used in. Silicon-28, which we expect to enable quantum computing and advanced semiconductors. There's 3 isotopes there as well, 28, 29, and 30. And again, a bag of sand is, probably $1 a kilo. A kilo of silicon-28, our first customer, we're paying over $500,000 a kilo. And that's the semiconductor company. And so, these we take very basic chemicals and we convert them into very special materials that have very specific applications. So this is one of the reasons why I became interested in this industry. I've been looking at it for 20 years, mainly as an investor. And the isotope companies regularly had supply side shortages, regularly had supply shocks, and consequently missed earnings. And so we met South African scientists and had an opportunity to buy them out of business rescue. And I recognized early on this could create a great company. And more recently, the supply chains become even more challenged given what's going on in terms of geopolitics. We have two methods of enriching isotopes that we've discussed and published. The first is the aerodynamic separation process, and the second is quantum enrichment. So the ASP process is great for anything you can turn into a gas, specifically low molecular weight gases. So these light gases, and they can't be done in a traditional centrifuge that Russia would use because they need very heavy gases, and that has certain benefits for us. Our plants are modular, they're cheap to build, and they're quick to build as well. Quantum enrichment uses a laser, so it's great for anything that doesn't turn into a gas. And we heat the metal up, turn it into a vapor, pass it through a very specially tuned laser beam, and there we can ionize particular isotopes and pull them out using electronic charges. Here's a picture of a carbon-14 plant in Pretoria. And you'll see the left-hand side is separators. In the middle, you see the light element recovery. In the right, you see the heavy element recovery. So to summarize, our plants are cost-effective, modular, and very environmentally friendly. So let's talk about nuclear medicine first. So the nuclear medicine market is growing rapidly, and there are a lot of new isotopes that are evolving to help treat patients of various diseases. And this slide here just demonstrates the symbiotic relationship between ASP Isotopes and PET labs. PET labs require stable isotopes to make radioisotopes. So you can see there's a real kind of upstream, downstream positive effect there. And so the first medical isotope we'll likely commercialize is the ytterbium-176. The plant's being commissioned right now. It's in the final stages of being commissioned. And this is used to make new radiomedicines. And Novartis' Pluvicto is an example of a radiomedicine that uses ytterbium-176. And a radiopharmacy will irradiate ytterbium-176 and produce lutetium-177. And that's the feedstock for Novartis' Pluvicto. We expect our plant to produce about 1 kilogram a year, and we expect to be charging about $20,000 a gram for this. We're talking to many customers who need it and are ready to sign agreements to purchase it. Zinc-68 is a plant we'd like to build later this year, early next year, and that's used as to make gallium-68, which is a diagnostic used to diagnose patients that use these new lutetium and actinium-based drugs. This market is expected to grow substantially over the next sort of 10, 15 years as these lutetium and actinium drugs grow. And there's a real supply side shortage right now. So we're looking forward to entering this market and supplying the market with another essential isotope. And the largest medical isotope we see an opportunity is molybdenum-100. This can be used to make technetium-99. Currently, technetium-99 is made out of molybdenum-99, which comes out of a nuclear reactor and has a 2.5-day half-life. It's shipped around the world, and every 2.5 days is losing half its value. It's a very problematic supply chain. We think molybdenum-100 is a much better way of doing it, and it's stable. You can store it in inventory, and you can just ship it in a normal shipping package. So here's an early picture of our carbon-14 plant, and this plant has started commercial production already. And we've signed a take-or-pay contract with a Canadian customer who requires about $2.5 million. Has actually agreed to a minimum of $2.5 million of product a year, and it could be more. And so yeah, we expect to start supplying this customer, around the middle of the end of the first half, that kind of time frame. It takes quite a while to produce the first batch, and after the first batch is produced, every 45 days, we can produce another batch of product. So this slide just summarizes, the medical isotopes and timelines. We think semiconductors is a very exciting area for us to be producing isotopes in, and researchers have discovered that if you can remove the 29 isotope from silicon, a semiconductor could be thousands of fold faster, and, and also process heat much more rapidly. And so to make faster semiconductors to enable things like artificial intelligence and quantum computing, it's widely believed silicon 28 will help do that. So we've just started our plant up. We announced that this morning, that the silicon 28 plant is now in commercial production. And we've signed 2 contracts here, both with US customers, one large US semiconductor company and one large global industrial gas company. And we should be shipping that product during the second quarter of this year. There's other isotopes the electronics industry needs for next generation semiconductors. We think depleted germanium 73 is also important, and we have a couple of customers needing that, and we'll enrich the 70 isotope of germanium. And then ytterbium-171 and barium-137, there's a lot of interest in that to enable quantum computing. And then helium-3 is also used in the semiconductor industry, and it's a very short supply of it. We intend to take our ASP plants to Iceland later this year. We've signed a supply agreement for a very low-cost energy supply, and we've also signed a lease for a building in Iceland. And this will really drive down our cost of production to make it whereby we're the lowest cost producer of isotopes globally. So a lot of people are excited about nuclear energy and quantum leap energy. And the problem is well known. The world needs more electricity. The world would like to remain net zero over the next 30 years. Some countries have said they're going to try and triple the amount of nuclear power by 2050. And, obviously that's fantastic. I think there's going to be a challenge, but it's fantastic. And we, and I think many others, believe that the future of nuclear energy is a small modular reactor. The problem with nuclear energy historically has been that a nuclear plant takes, 10 to 20 years to build. It costs $10 to $20 billion to build. You build it in the middle of nowhere. You're going to go try and find the transmission to get the energy from the middle of nowhere to a large city. And there's typically large overruns both on time and on cost. Small modular reactors take nuclear energy to production line economics and should allow much cheaper, smaller reactors closer to civilizations. The exclusion zone around TerraPower's Natrium is 600 yards versus 6 miles for some nuclear reactors. And the main companies involved in this space are TerraPower, that's Bill Gates' company, X-Energy, that's Cam Gafasian, Oklo, which is Sam Altman, and Rolls-Royce. And the problem for these reactors is most of them require a new type of uranium called HALEU, which is enriched to 19.75%. And there's no Western supplier of commercial quantities of HALEU today. And a lot of these reactors have been delayed because they can't get the fuel for them. We believe quantum enrichment is the best way to enrich solids, you can't enrich gas, and also uranium. And this chart here kind of shows, or compares different types of enrichment. And you'll see the selectivity line, which is on the 4th line down, shows you how efficacious an enrichment process is. And you'll see at greater than 50, quantum enrichment is likely the most efficacious of all the enrichment processes known today. And this is quite a scientific slide, but essentially we use multiple laser beams, which we combine and shape in a particular way, and then we pass that through a vapor of metal, and then we're able to strip out one isotope from another. This is the only published data on quantum enrichment to date. This is lithium-6 and lithium-7. This is contained in the PhD of our Chief Technology Officer. And you'll see at the top, the feedstock, lithium-7, lithium-6 is at 7%. And after a single pass through our chamber, the lithium-6 is now over 90%. So that's an enrichment factor of about 112. So when we say greater than 50, we mean substantially greater than 50. And we've seen up to 678 in some isotopes, which is amazing. So one of the problems right now is the nuclear fuel supply chain. All prices are typically trading at 5 to 10 year all-time highs. There's suddenly an increase in demand as well as supply side shocks, and it's very rare to see a commodity increase in price by 5-fold, yet see a zero supply side response to it, and that's kind of what we've seen here. Obviously, we compete in or want to compete in the enrichment part of this industry, and one of the benefits of having a really very high enrichment factor, we get a very low cost of enriching. And so if you look here, and most of the SMRs were invented or theorized, the cost of HALEU would have been about $5,000 to $7,000 per kilo. But now, it's more like $20,000 a kilo. So a lot of these SMRs have to rethink their business models, go to larger SMRs where the cost of HALEU is less significant or less of a factor. And you'll see the cost of HALEU split roughly a third in the ore, a third in enrichment, and about 4/5 in ore, 4/5 in enrichment, and a sixth in conversion. And what we're excited about our technology is that we believe we can take depleted nuclear waste, so tails from other enrichers, and convert that to HALEU. And that would really lower the cost of production by lowering our cost of ore dramatically. And so I say we've signed an MOU with NEXA, which is the South Africa Nuclear Energy Corporation. And our plan is to start building an experimental plant there later on this year, and hope then to build a commercial plant and be first to market with commercial quantities of HALEU. We've signed 2 MOUs or term sheets with 2 large US SMR companies, one of whom we've disclosed as TerraPower, and collectively those 2 customers need about $37 billion of HALEU between now and 2037, and there's no Western supplier of that. And they need it this decade as well, not next decade. And again, there's no Western supplier who can kind of get there in time. So we're working as hard as we can to get this plant built. So as my concluding slide, we have 2 proven proprietary technologies developed over the last 20, 30 years in South Africa. There's multiple secular and geopolitical tailwinds, lots of new technologies that need new isotopes. I say consistent operational performance. We've built 3 manufacturing plants in 3 years, and we're looking forward to building a lot more over the next several years. So Anna, I'll stop there, and I'll take any questions you may have from the listeners.
Right, Paul, we do have lots of questions, so I'm going to just start, and forgive me if they might seem redundant, because I know you went through that pretty quick. So Tim wants you to talk a little bit more. You just spoke about it, the discussions. When will you be able to begin discussions with SMR manufacturers other than TerraPower to supply them with HALEU? Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we've already had 2 MOUs with 2 SMR manufacturers, and we've spoken to or are talking to maybe 4 or 5 more. All have got different promises and different outlooks. There are probably 50 or 60 SMR companies out there, most of which need HALEU. My personal prediction, sorry to be a pessimist, is that probably only 3 or 4 are going to make it to market. The other 44, 54 will fail. I think being first to market is a huge advantage, and being well capitalized and good technology and ahead of the game in terms of the licensing is also really important. So our partners we've chosen fit that characteristics. They're both very well capitalized. They're very advanced in terms of where they are in the licensing and design stage. And quite frankly, we'll struggle to supply all their needs over the next 10 years. The amount they need is just so vast. And so whether we sign any more MOUs or not, we'll have to wait and see, or contracts have to wait and see. But we'll talk to and sign contracts with anyone who we think looks like a realistic candidate to get their product to market.
Thank you. Brito asks, when is the next feedstock for carbon-14 arriving to plant?
It should be arriving in the next few days. We've said it'll arrive around the end of March, beginning of April, and so right now we're expecting it to arrive in line with that guidance. I think they're preparing for it to leave Tennessee kind of right now. So yeah, the first feedstock was delayed by about 6 to 9 months, which is really frustrating because the plant was operational and ready to go. But they appear to have sorted out or ironed out most of the supply chain wrinkles and problems of shipping nuclear waste across borders.
And Tom wants to know, why did you not get the deadline for ytterbium?
We haven't missed it yet. We've got 4 days to go, and they're doing really well. So we've had a few problems in the commissioning phase. So, for example, the mass spectrometer, which we use in the vessel to tell us how much enrichment is taking place at a particular time, was kind of faulty at first, and so we had to get the OEM supplier, who happened to be in the UK, to come to South Africa and fix it and mend it, and that set us back by a little while. But now, it's working fine. We've also changed the mass spectrometer from a time of flight to a quadrupole, and we kind of think that's a better mass spectrometer for steering and driving the process. And we're seeing great enrichment happening right now. We're seeing enrichment factors of well over 100, which is what we want to see. And so they're in the final stages now of just tweaking and changing certain voltages, currents. It's difficult to experiment while you are in commercial production. And so we want to make sure they've finished their experiments in terms of tweaking the process before we start that process.
And with that said, talk a little bit about some guidance. What is your current guidance on start of commercial production of ytterbium, and what are the reasons for the potentially different guidance today from before?
So we've said we expect to start production during the first quarter, and we're still in the first quarter now. There's about 4 days to go still, and so the team are working hard to get that plant started up and commercially producing.
And can you discuss milestones needed and timeline for the QLE spinout?
Yeah, so we've kind of said there are two important things that are needed in order to spin out QLE. The first is that we have to have a location identified where we can build our first nuclear fuel plant. And we're talking to 3 countries, 3 governments, one in North America, one in Europe, and one in South Africa, obviously. And as I say, it's the United States, UK, and South Africa. And in November last year, we signed an MOU with NECSA, which is South African Nuclear Engineering Corporation, that would allow us to go to Pelindaba, which is the nuclear site in South Africa, and build an enrichment facility there. Now that's really important because that site is well known to the IAEA, has a lot of the licenses and permits in place already. It has a nuclear reactor on the site. It has 24/7 power. They store a lot of highly enriched uranium on the site as well. So a lot of the security is in place from a non-proliferation standpoint, and the buildings are in place already. We estimate that if we were to try and rebuild that site in the United States, it'd probably take 10 years and cost $250 million. So this gives us a huge head start over doing it in a more developed or Western country. So that's the first box ticked. We know where we're going to enrich our first uranium. The second thing we need to see is a line of sight to free cash flow generation within ASPI. And with 2 out of 3 plants now operational, we expect to have that line of sight very soon. So it feels like we're ready to execute the spin, really pretty soon.
Great. Freddie says you proved you can enrich ytterbium with the laser tech. Is that the exact same technique with uranium for HALEU?
It's very similar, very similar. So ytterbium is it vaporizes at quite a low temperature, 700 Kelvin, and it also doesn't have many forbidden regions where isotopes can sit, and so we can get away with just a few lasers for ytterbium. When we move to uranium, we need a couple more lasers because the spectroscopy of the beam is slightly more complex in terms of the wavelengths and colors, and more of the uranium doesn't sit in the ground state, and so again we have to address that slightly differently. And that's one of the reasons where Avalis failed sort of 30 years ago, is they were unable to address ions that weren't sitting in the or atoms that weren't sitting in the ground state. And so there are some changes between ytterbium and uranium, but they're more similar than different.
Jordan asks, is the TerraPower longer-term contract finalized?
When it's finalized, we'll announce it. I think we've said we expect to finalize it. Actually, I'm not sure if we've given any guidance, so I better not say anything, but we expect to finalize it quite soon. And the 2 sides are working pretty hard to agree upon. It's quite a complex supply agreement to finalize. The price and volume you agree in the first week or 2, but then there's all sorts of problems like who's going to ship it, how's it going to get shipped, who's paying for feedstock, where can the feedstock come from, how does the feedstock get shipped to the plant, who's paying for it, when is it ordered, who's going to test, who's going to do the final sign off on the product quality and the enrichment quality, and how's that going to get tested, and what assays are being used. So there's a whole load of things that need to get included in a final supply agreement. Also, TerraPower's agreed to fund our first plant, and so we're also negotiating an investment agreement whereby they will invest in the first plant, and that will come as a prepayment against future fuels, so it's non-dilutive to our balance sheet. And we'd expect to execute both agreements at the same time.
Sebastian wants to know, will the 10K be filed on time?
Yeah, I think we've got until March 31st, 5 p.m. Eastern time. So we've got 4 days still.
And has the SI-28 commercial production commenced?
Yeah, so we published a press release this morning stating we'd started commercial production of Silicon-28, and we expect to supply our first customers during the second quarter of this year. The plant looks great. The team's done a great job getting that plant up and running, and it's the largest plant we've ever built. It's about 40 times the size of our carbon plant, and it's running really well. The commissioning's gone very smoothly. A couple of small hiccups as any commissioning process goes, but they got through them, they solved them, and now it's doing great.
And when can ASP start putting spades in the ground at Nexa, and what is the likely time frame inclusive of final sign-off from the regulatory body?
Well, we've already had shovels in the ground, should we say, because we already have one test bench at Pelindaba built, ready to go. We're building the second test bench at the moment. We'd expect that second test bench to be built, probably around the middle of the year, that third quarter, that kind of time frame. And we're in discussions with the National Nuclear Regulator, that's the NNR, which is the equivalent of the NRC in the United States, to get the final sign-off and permits to allow us to enrich at Pelindaba. The DMRE, which is the Department of Minerals, Resources and Energy, have already said that we're fine to enrich uranium at Pelindaba from a non-proliferation standpoint. And actually, yesterday was a mental day for South Africa because they celebrated the 60th birthday of the Safari reactor at Pelindaba. So I went up to Pelindaba yesterday to attend the birthday party with some of the ministers and some of the government people, and it was a great day to see so many really skilled nuclear engineers and nuclear scientists who've done so much for the world in terms of new medicines and new treatments.
And Tim says, you mentioned on a previous call that ASP team has expertise in the uranium conversion space. So do you have any plans to get into that space, considering the bottleneck that's formed in the market?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hell of a bottleneck that's formed. Prices, I think, are up sort of 7 or 8-fold over the last 3 years. We certainly have the capability of going into that market. We certainly have the capability of building a plant in that market. We probably have one of the few teams in the world who have actually designed, constructed, commissioned, operated, and decommissioned a large conversion plant and deconversion plant for that matter. And they all work for us at ASP Isotopes. And that brings together skills in fluorine chemistry, as well as uranium chemistry and radioactive physical chemistry as well. So it's not a simple thing to do. I'm not sure we'd build one using our balance sheet. I think we'd rather use someone else's balance sheet to build such a plant, as the return on capital for a conversion plant is actually lower than the return on capital for, say, a laser plant or, say, an ASP plant. But we're certainly talking to a number of potential customers, people who need conversion, and let's see where those discussions go over the next few months.
And William asks if you have any guidance or timeline for profitability.
Yeah, we said we expect or hope to get to generate free cash flow before the end of the year. So I guess during the second half of the year.
And a question, someone noticed TerraPower and Elemental Power have participated in recent investor events alongside ASP. What progress has been made towards a finalized deal with TerraPower and Elemental Power, especially establishing a U.S. presence?
Yeah, so if we enter the US market for uranium enrichment, we'd likely do it with a partner and who has more expertise at dealing with the NRC than we do, and may already have a site that's licensed for nuclear activities. I think building a greenfield site would be a slow and expensive way to do it. I suppose we're talking to maybe 3 or 4 customers, enrichers, people involved in the nuclear fuel supply chain who may want to get involved in building an enrichment facility in the United States with us. And so, listen, it takes a while to go through those discussions, but certainly, our goal is to build a facility in the United States. The United States is the country that needs this the most. It just also has the largest, regulatory and licensing hurdles, and doesn't help because we've only got 2 US-based employees, neither of whom are nuclear engineers. And so it's just a slow process, but we're certainly working towards it, and we'd like to do it at some point.
And how close is ASP to providing information on additional deals in the pipeline, as well as potential customer names?
Yes, I mean, We're continually talking to customers. We've probably negotiating 10 to 15 contracts at a time. Most of these contracts take about a year to conclude. And so, watch this space. But we've signed a number of smaller kind of MOUs and MOUs with many customers, and we're in the process of negotiating contracts for multiple different isotopes.
And can you give an update on carbon-14 feedstock and the final Icelandic permits?
Yeah, so the first carbon-14 feedstock arrived in January. The second is expected to arrive in the next sort of few days or so. And in terms of Icelandic permits, we've got most of the permits that we need, and we're talking to the government fairly regularly, and we'd expect to get the permits we need, well ahead of when we need to build the plant, when we want to build the plant.
Last question from Jordan to follow up on the TerraPower. Did you say they may invest in your next plant? Might they also participate in a QLT deal?
So we've already said that they will invest in our first uranium facility in South Africa, and that'll be non-dilutive to us. It'll be essentially a prepayment for the fuel they're going to take from that plant. They may choose to invest as well. We haven't really had that. We've had that discussion. We'll have to see. Have to see.
Okay, perfect, Paul. We'll send the rest of these questions to you so you can answer on your own. But thank you for joining us and this update. We always love having you.
Thank you for your interest.
All right.